The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the My Council Services webinar. I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes or so looking at how the My Council Services platform can help accelerate and deliver channel shift and enable broader transformation, but with a specific view on the kind of customer self-service stroke CRM side of things. This is the second webinar we've been running today. We had an in-depth look at the waste module that the platform offers for any repeat visitors. These sessions really are designed primarily for those people that are new to the platform, but we also make them available to our existing customers and people that may have seen the platform before. And I'd just like to emphasise that everyone's very welcome. The only thing I would say in terms of expectation management is we do start from the ground up, as though you know nothing about the platform, so we introduce it. So for those of you who are on the call, and we have a good number on the call this afternoon, you may see some material that you've seen before, but that's for the benefit of those that are new to us. So, welcome everybody. It's myself, Bernie Simmons, and my colleague Rachel Clinton that are facilitating this afternoon. I'm afraid to have to tell you that you're going to hear my voice for most of the next 45 minutes. Although Rachel plays an important and crucial role in proceedings, which I'll explain in just a moment. So as part of the frequently asked questions, the things that folks often ask about these sorts of events, at top of that list is this session being recorded? It is being recorded, and it will be made available via our website on an on-demand basis, and you will receive an email with all of the details and appropriate links should you want to watch it again. Or more likely, should you want to share it with colleagues internally in order that they can watch it for a first time. You can be the judge of whether it warrants a repeat viewing or not. In terms of the materials that I'm using, I'm going to be using two sets of media really. Some slides to get us started, so about sort of 15-20 minutes worth of slideware, and then probably kind of half an hour to 40 minutes worth of demo. So we give the majority of the time over to demonstrating capabilities live on the platform. But it is important just to kind of give a bit of an introduction and lend a bit of structure to the session. So the slides that I use will be available afterwards. If you like what you see this afternoon and you want colleagues to be able to see the same type of thing, perhaps with a bit more detail, but run privately for your organisation, we can do that too. We can do private demonstrations and workshops either in this kind of a format, so as an online and conference call format, and of course we can visit on site. So we do a lot of that. We work exclusively with UK local authorities pretty much, so we're used to moving around the countryside, visiting our customers and prospective customers to help them in their due diligence. So very happy to facilitate those if it's of interest and it's a conversation that you want to progress. No obligations on that front, of course. In terms of asking questions, so all lines will be muted for the duration of the call. The reason we do that is we've got a lot of people on the call, lots of folks dialed in, and we're conscious that you are in often open plan offices or environments where you can't necessarily control all of the background noise, so it's better that we mute everybody's lines. So, but we don't want to discourage you from asking questions. The way we would ask that you do that is to use the chat facility on the GoToWebinar console. And if you direct your questions at my colleague Rachel is facilitating things in the background this afternoon. As I said, you'll hear mainly from me. But if you have questions, direct them via the chat facility at Rachel, and she will answer them as we walk through the session this afternoon in real time. Sometimes we get a slew of questions, just too many to deal with, or sometimes kind of questions that are quite nuanced in their nature and need a more detailed conversation. If that happens, Rachel will just let you know so that it's something we need to deal with offline, or we'll come back to you after the event. But don't feel that you can't ask questions. We want you to be able to ask your questions and get them answered in the best way possible. So please do feel free to use the chat facility to do that. In terms of actual structure and agenda, we are going to do a quick background and introduction to not just the platform, but some of the challenges in local government. I'll move to that pretty quickly because it's pretty well-trodden ground. And then, of course, an intro to My Council Services specifically. And then we'll talk a little bit about customers already using the platform, and then we'll spend 30-40 minutes looking at some demonstration examples of things that customers can do to help you, or that you can do to help your customers drive your transformation program. I've talked about how to ask questions, and we will answer them. as I said, use the chat facility for that if you would, please. So in terms of challenges for local authorities, these are not new. I think the financial crash that kind of introduced and ushered in what has been in excess of a decade of fiscal austerity and public sector austerity is still very much with us, much to our collective disappointment and fatigue, I would imagine. But regardless, we're faced with situations where budgets are shrinking, central government grants have been significantly reduced, and there's a need for local authorities in particular, because I think you guys, your organisations have been right on the kind of bleeding edge of that, which has not been easy to deal with. Although I would say, as someone that spends a lot of time in terms of my professional activity speaking with local authorities, it never fails to impress me how A, resilient local authorities are, and B, how innovative they can be when the chips are down. So kudos to all of you on that basis. But we've got shrinking budgets, reducing resources, probably alongside that, resources, assets and people being not necessarily being replaced when they disappear, and not being upgraded as they may have been historically. So which gives you less to work with. But on the flip side of that, if it was a perfect storm you were after, we've probably got it, because you've got customers shifting expectations. All of us, I would say, these days have very much kind of 21st century expectations of what customer service should be, and what we feel it should be is through the channel of our choice at the time of our choosing, with immediate and effective responses to our questions, queries and transactions. And we will pick and choose how and when we interact with customers generally. And I think increasingly no allowance is given to service providers, whether that service provider is commercial in nature or public service in nature. We are, I think, all fairly critical and have fairly high expectations when we step out of our, perhaps our professional connection with local authorities and think about ourselves as consumers of services. So no shortage of challenges. The other one that we see, as I said, we work pretty much exclusively with local authorities, but we see historically, when you look back at the way a local authority is structured, there's been a tendency for things to be fairly siloed in nature. And so you will have the waste function or the public protection function, or customer services sometimes is a bit of a silo, or leisure services, whatever it might be. I don't mean that in any way as a criticism. The reason for its kind of emergence as a fairly sort of siloed operational model historically is fairly obvious. When you think about the intricacies and the resources involved in delivering any of those services, be it waste or social care at either end of those spectrums in terms of what you're doing, there's no shortage of complexity or challenge in service delivery, and no shortage of demanding customers. So it's not surprising that if you're head of service and you're working within that service, or you're somewhere, you're kind of cog in the wheel of that service, that you are going to focus in on what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So there's a lack of sometimes kind of cross-functional and cross-service area activity. And that's a challenge, because what you end up with is duplication of both IT systems and duplication of administration systems. And what that leads to is overall a high cost of ownership and duplicate administration processes. You're kind of doubling up on things. You end up with your data all over the place in lots of different third-party systems. That's a headache operationally, and it's even more of a headache under the glare of contemporary data protection legislation in the form of the GDPR. So you need to kind of get your hands around that piece. And you can also, from a customer's point of view, to our kind of earlier point around customer expectations, you end up with almost feeling, it can feel like, as a customer, you come into one function, and it feels like you're dealing with one organisation. You come into another part of the organisation, and it feels like you're dealing with a totally different organisation. There's a danger with that kind of more siloed approach to not feel very joined up, and to have a Heath Robinson kind of integration in the background, if indeed you're that fortunate. So there's lots of downsides to that siloed approach, but we understand where it's come from and why perhaps it looks like it looks. But I think the other thing I would say, and I've just popped a slide up on screen that that describes kind of what we're seeing now in terms of a more contemporary structure for local authorities, which is generally a more tightly organised and coherent multi-channel customer service function up here that covers multiple channels, and increasingly, not in every case, fronts every single service area. There are still direct access functions or direct access points to some service areas. Waste is sometimes an example, leisure services is certainly an example. But generally, customer services are increasingly kind of front of house. So we see a more kind of pan-organisational layer up here, and it's important that that layer is enabled with technology, which is what we're going to be talking about this afternoon. Sitting behind that, in terms of service delivery, of course, you must maintain a minimum viable service in terms of service delivery area with its appropriate resources. You've got to be able to do what you need to be able to do at a functional and technical level, and your colleagues in IT will also be working hard, I expect, in the background to make sure that they're providing a more consolidated system and data architecture. So we're seeing this kind of more layered but more joined up organisational structure occurring, which I think tells us a couple of things. One is that the answer to transformation and increased digitisation, increased efficiency, it lies partly in technology but not solely. There's a big organisational change aspect to this, and as a software provider we need to constantly remind ourselves that yes, the technology is important, but it's not the only ingredient into the successful transformation programme, but it is an important one. The other thing I would just mention is sometimes it's easy to forget you've got a customer in the centre of these things. So it's important that in your processes and your activities and your automation efforts that you are not forgetting that you should probably be keeping your customers up to date on what's happening with their fly tip request or their green garden waste contract or their sports pitch booking or whatever it might be. So there's been a shift in organisational structure. The upsides of that approach, you tend to end up, if you unify around the technology platform, unify around kind of process design principles, you'll end up with much more unified processes internally, which is good for you and good for customers. If you can get your hands around and start to kind of defragment your data infrastructure and your systems infrastructure, then you will end up with a lower cost of ownership whilst maintaining access to those specialist skills to deliver those all-important services to customers that need them the most. So there are upsides to the kind of transformation piece, not to mention increased efficiency and the ability to balance budgets as an outcome for your organisation. So with that in mind, with a kind of more contemporary structure in mind, how does My Accounts for Services fit into that? Well, we fit it, I'll build this slide and I'll move through it fairly quickly. We fit it in multiple ways. So it's been designed and engineered as a platform, My Accounts for Services as a digital platform, to match the local authority contemporary structure. So we have the top two layers that we'll really be looking at this afternoon in the next kind of 40 minutes or so. There's a customer self-service piece, which I'll show you in just a moment. And then sitting behind that, there's a CRM service desk component, which is really all about the management of things that are created at the top customer contact layer. And then we drill into some of the more specific line of business modules. We, of course, recognise that My Accounts for Services, where it's used, is not the only system or platform in an organisation. We operate invariably in a mixed economy of different products, different technology systems that are being used, and we need to be able to integrate and automate around those, and we do all of that, and I'll talk to that a bit later on. And then also from a closed loop point of view, I'm not going to be showing that this afternoon, but we also offer a mobile worker piece. So the concept there being that if someone reports that fly tip in the morning via their handheld device, how do you make sure you get that out to an operative that's either outsourced or internal on their digital device, be that a smartphone or indeed be that a tablet, so that they've got that digital task sheet available to them in very near time, if not real time, so that they can deal with it and get it resolved for you. And in the process of doing that, once that is done, you can take that piece of information and share it back with a customer, so that you're completing and closing that feedback loop and taking out as much of the kind of manual intervention as is appropriate to do. I choose my words quite carefully there, because this is not just about stripping out contact. I mean, that's part of it in terms of telephone and face-to-face contact, but it's really about delivering and deploying your resources to the people and places that need them most, and allowing folks that are happy to do things in a self-service way and an automated way to do exactly that. It's probably fair to say that the vast majority of your customers are very comfortable working with an online form or a customer portal and receiving kind of automated updates off the back of that. They don't necessarily want to spend time on the phone with you, but those perhaps with more complex needs, with certain vulnerabilities and challenges, may well need that face-to-face kind of more human touch. And it is one of the, I suppose, kind of more dignifying aspects of working in the public sector and local authorities in particular is, there's a distinct value to the work that you're doing. It's not about lifting cash out of people's pockets. It's about improving the quality of lives for your residents in your district, borough, unitary area or shire area. And that's a motivation for all of us on the call, I think. So there's some background in terms of how we fit. I'll continue to move through pretty quickly. I just want to do a bit more detail on the service desk and the self-service and service desk and CRM layer, because that's where we're going to be focusing, and then I'll skip through the other two pretty quickly. But we offer an from the ground up kind of, you can design an e-form, deploy an individual e-form as a specific item embedded as an integrated part of your website with all of your appropriate branding and visual identity on it, to allow someone to do something very simple or quite complex. Equally, you can deploy that suite of e-forms via what we call our My Account Enterprise offering. So that's the ability to have someone, register and log in and identify themselves, and in doing so, opt into all the privileges of, personalized updates, being able to access data that perhaps resides in different systems through a single sign-on approach. So there's lots of potential benefits. The point I'm trying to make, probably in a rather roundabout way, is to say that you can have it your way. So you can decide to deploy individual e-forms that can be used as a guest, so you don't have to log in or create a profile or any of those things, and or you can have a My Account profile where a customer can log in, register themselves, and opt into the benefits of being an identified user. We can wrap additional security around that registration process, things such as two-factor verification. So someone comes up, registers with maybe an email address, a phone number, and a strong password. That then takes that phone number, pings them a four-digit PIN code back to it, so that they can two-factor verify in terms of telling you that they really are who they say they are. All of these things are available as part of the My Account Services offering. Alongside the kind of browser-based e-forms, we also offer a suite of native mobile application suites. We're not going to focus too heavily on there this afternoon, but I will give you a quick sneak preview if we get time. The other thing, just to mention, lurking down in the bottom right-hand corner, I've already made reference to it earlier, but we're fully GDPR compliant, and I'll talk about some of those controls and governance measures as we move through. Sitting behind the kind of self-service layer, there's a whole bunch of really what we would call line of business capability. We're going to focus less on that in our remaining time together this afternoon, but there's a lot of detail here. Because we focused on local authorities as our core market, it's enabled us to build automation deeply into the process. So we have, for example, a dedicated waste management function, which we were talking about with other local authorities colleagues this morning. And we do things like license and contract management modules, schedules and bookings modules, so that if you've got a process that is based on a booking or an appointment making function, we've got a generic module that can deal with that. So be that booking a bulky item uplift, or be it booking an appointment with a revenues and benefits advisor, or reserving tickets for a concert series that you might be running, we can cater to all of those requirements. The same with things like license and contracts management and permits management. So there are lots of processes in the local authority that look like, and in fact are, contractual arrangements between the council and the individual concerned, be that a resident or a business. Think about green garden waste, where if you charge for that service in your borough, your district, or your unitary area, you are entering into a contract on an annual basis, typically, where you charge a sum per year in return for a customer putting all of their green garden waste, their lawn cuttings, their hedge trimmings, into a appropriate receptacle that you provide. They pay for that service, you come and collect it on a 14-day basis or whatever it might be. That essentially is the same as any other commercial contract. Roll that over into something like accessible parking and accessible transport. The Blue Badge permit scheme is a contract-based process. It's a 3-year entitlement to accessible parking and transport facilities and infrastructure. And it has to be governed and managed as a contract. Think about application for a skip or scaffold or whatever it might be. All of these things are contracts. So our idea has been to develop these functions once, but allow you to deploy them multiple times across your organisation, and in doing so, driving efficiency. Very, very briefly, and finally, the kind of mobile worker piece, I referenced this earlier, but it's the ability to get an inbound request from whichever channel out to a worker or a contracted worker using a handheld device or a cab-mounted device, so they can get on with that and work off a digital task sheet. So that we offer an end-to-end process effectively in that regard. So just very briefly to recap, our response to UK local authority transformation, self-service, and we suffix that by saying where it's appropriate to do so. This is not just about stripping out costs. Sure, that's part of the objective, and that's the reality of what every organisation, local authority organisation, has had to do and probably has to continue to do in the UK. But it's also about making sure that you can tailor the service that's appropriate to the customer's needs. Automation, and again, where it makes sense to do so. So don't automate everything, but automate for everything that is in the normal range of things and allow for the exceptions to be hooked out. We've seen so many examples over the last 10, 12 years that we've been working closely with local authorities and delivering My Council services where a process historically has been engineered to try and cater for every exception. And unfortunately, what happens when you try and do that is you end up getting yourself in knots a lot of the time. So it's much better to try and automate for the normal range of things, the 95% of things that fall into the normal range, and have someone that's got a human intelligence about them, a bit of common sense, hook out the stuff that is outside of that normal range. It may be possible, but certainly in the first pass, we would say automate for the normal. Don't automate for the ordinary. Don't automate for the extraordinary. Yeah, from our side of that bargain, we've got to be cost effective. We've only ever delivered My Council services in the white heat of the prevailing austere conditions from a budgetary point of view. So we've had to be pretty nimble on our toes in terms of what we ask for in return for our services, and we have to make sure we do what we said we would do when we said we would do it. So that's our end of the bargain. And we have to make sure that we are scalable, and we work with organisations that are relatively small district and borough councils right up to some of the very largest unitary authorities. And on that note, there's a quick list of some of our customers. You're going to get a copy of these slides, so I won't read back through these for you, but we will be sharing a copy of them shortly. I promised you about 15-20 minutes of demonstration. We are just ticked over the 20 minutes, so I'm just about on schedule. So what we'll do at this stage is jump across to a browser-based interface and see if we can't give you a bit of a demo of the system. And in doing so, I'll get rid of all my scribbles on the slides. I always wonder how helpful they are, but hopefully I've explained things reasonably clearly so far. So I've jumped across to a Google Chrome browser. I'm already logged in as a customer, so I'm going to run this side of the demo, the customer-facing side of the demonstration, as though I'm a registered customer. Just to make it clear, I've said it already, but I just want to reiterate. I'm conscious I'm moving quite quickly through the content because we've got quite a bit to get through. That you don't have to make customers register for an account if you're using My Council services. You can deploy individual e-forms that don't require any registration for use. Someone can rock up to your website and use them as an anonymous stroke guest user, and/or you can decide an individual form requires registration, or indeed you can deploy things as a portal. I'm going to be showing this to you as a portal this afternoon, so that we can just kind of get the sense of what it is in the round. And there are obviously some benefits of being a registered customer with your council provider, because it means you can opt into things like personalised updates and perhaps get access to data that wouldn't otherwise be accessible to you on a self-service basis. And I will show you some examples of that in the next 5 or 10 minutes. So there's the kind of context for it. Let me try and explain some of the screen layout and screen real estate. Left-hand sidebar is a configurable drop-down set of menus. You can have this as long or as short as you wish. You can have lots of stuff nested behind a prior reference, and it's basically there for quick access points for customers. So we've got this organised as the home screen, which we're looking at currently. I can access information about myself as a customer, my user details, my draft services, my contacts, services that I've already created, any messages that I might have received. I can access information about the council, so contact details. We're set up here as Redbridge Borough Council. Redbridge, just to be clear, Redbridge are not a customer of My Council services, but our first office before we moved into our current central London location were in the London Borough Redbridge, so it was the obvious place to kind of set up the demo instance. And so it's a historical accident fact, but I'll be kind of operating as though I were a customer of Redbridge Borough Council for the next 15-20 minutes or so. So then we've got a set of nested forms that cover pay for it. So I've got to check and pay your council tax balance. More about that in a moment. We've got a set of forms that are book it. So we've got options to book pest control service, book an bulky item collection. I'll show you one of those in a bit because it demonstrates some of the booking functionality. You can then do things like apply for it. So we've got blue badge application, green garden waste, single person discount. But you can organise these things in any way that you like. So there's no dictated format. It's entirely flexible. When the portal is deployed for a customer, it is an integrated and embedded part of your web property. So your .gov.uk domain, it's integrated and embedded within that. It's using the style sheets that create the look and feel and the visual identity for your council. So that we're looking at a generic non-branded version here. But when we deliver this for customers, it's fully embedded and integrated from a visual branding perspective. If we just start by doing something, I've got a Know My Bin Day look up here. It's a commonly used thing on sites. This is actually leveraging a bit of the waste module capability, just looking up bin data. And if I go to a particular address, so you'll notice I've just typed in the two crucial components. I don't know how familiar you all are with the anatomy of a UK address, but you really only need the street number, the house number or name, and the postcode. Everything else is kind of aesthetic padding in terms of an address really in the UK. And what we're doing here is we're matching against the National Land and Property Gazetteer address-based database. So the platform, when it's delivered, will typically have the full NLPG with it. That's one of the options that we typically include on the CRM self-service side. And that means that once you're doing address matching for kind of property-based services, there are place-based services, property-based services, people-centric services, but for any property-based service, if we're using NLPG, that means we can hand you and the rest of your data infrastructure and the rest of your organisation, a UPRN, an Easting and a Northing, an appropriate grid reference, whatever it happens to be, a street asset number, and all of those are embodied in the address-based product, which ships and is part of our product. I'm showing my age a little bit there by saying the product ships with. I should clarify at that point that the entire platform is cloud-based, accessed via a browser. If you're implementing My Council services, you're not installing componentry on your infrastructure, on your PCs. It's all delivered and hosted and provided, and that's all included in the implementation costs. Anyway, back to what we were doing, which is looking at some round collection data. So if I select that address, what that's doing actually, because on this example, we've got the refuse collection data for the council loaded and as a part of the data that's held on the My Council Services platform, a customer can pitch up as part of the portal, and they can be shown their refuse collection schedule. So we've got a green garden waste collection, 120 litre bin due on the 5th, and then there's a domestic collection due on the 8th, and they're on a rare beast these days on a 7-day collection cycle. If the registered customer, I'll come to speak more about who we're being in this example in terms of the customer profile we're using in a moment. But if this particular registered customer wants to see the full calendar, they can do so by clicking on calendar, and it will show the calendar with exception days. They can skip through months, remind themselves when their collections are either their standard domestic collections or their subscribed collections. So an easy way of making data available to the customer and the kind of first point of transaction, I suppose, in that regard. I will show one other example here actually, because I want to. It's important. We shared it this morning in the waste webinar, but it's a broader importance from a kind of customer self-service point of view, which is the ever-present kind of usual suspect of missed bins. So if I want to search for a particular form and I want to search for a missed bin collection, I can do that. All of the content in the browser interface as part of My Council Services is indexed for search. So I type in missed, I want to report a missed bin and drop that in, then it will bring me up a missed bin form. It's a pretty simple 2-step form or 3-step form. The form, missing items, and then a confirmation. So you get a breadcrumb trail across the top. We've created, this is sort of the first e-form, I suppose, if you will, that we're using. We've got some content here that's been configured to describe what the kind of rules and regs are around reporting a missed bin. And then we've got this selection option. So this is using the first of our plugin modules, which is the missed bin plugin, surprisingly enough. So if I again type in a postcode, E18 2HZ again, but this time we'll go for 56. So 56 Grove Hill in Redbridge. We've deliberately kind of loaded this up with all sorts of round collection information, just to kind of demonstrate the point really. But if customers are looking up bin collection data, that's one thing, that's useful. It may save a call in, may save you printing lots of laminated sheets that get hooked on the end of a bin, every 3 months when there's changes to exception days because of bank holidays and so on. Certainly save money there. But if you're looking at missed bin collections, that's an ever-present challenge for inbound calls into local authority calls, so contact centres. We can deliver this as a kind of conditional, intelligent, in inverted commas, service. So this particular property's got a whole bunch of collections registered against it: domestic collections, trade collections, green garden waste collections. Some of those are available for reporting, some are not. So this 24th of June one, for a domestic collection 120 litre wheelie bin, you cannot report that after 8 days. So that however much Gary, my registered customer, clicks here, he can't select that for reporting. Nor can he the 24th of June garden collection. Nor can he, rather unusually, the trade waste collection he's got against his property. But one from the 3rd of July, he can do that. So if he wants to report that as missing and then continue, it will actually then effectively create a service request that the customer can then submit. So we click on submit, and it was a really simple two-step process, but it gives the levers of control to you as the authority to say, well, you know, given the time elapsed, or indeed the time of day, if it is collection day, you can configure rules around the missed bin collection module that say either you can or you cannot report this. So you can govern that and control the amount of inbound contact you're going to get in that regard. We'll come back to that in a moment. Just for a sort of change of diversion, I want to draw your attention up to the top right-hand corner, where we've got a little thumbnail of my pretend customer. I've mentioned my pretend customer's name is a chap called Gary Wilcox, who's a completely fictitious member of the public, resident of Redbridge Borough Council. But Gary can go in and can effectively manage his interactions with the council through his My Account settings. So he's got a pretty comprehensive set of tools available to him. He can establish links with other individuals. So he's got his brother and his grandmother linked in here as relationships that are recognised via the council that have gone through authorised processes. And on the top right-hand list, he can add and manage his contact details. He can set notification preferences. So you can say, yeah, I'm happy to be contacted by phone, by letter, and put them in order effectively. You can subscribe to notification groups. So summer activity camps for kids notification, jobs, half-term news, whatever it might be. He can also then, from a GDPR point of view, pull some of the levers that point towards the right to be forgotten, which of course is the primary premise that underpins the GDPR. So if he goes to remove my data, he can see all of his all of his service request interactions, and he can choose to remove those individually if he wishes. So the ability to remove individual records. I'm sure there's a question on everybody's lips at this point, but just hold that thought for a moment. So he can choose to delete individual records at his behest, and he can also choose to remove all of his data. So he can remove data completely. So it's either individual records he can take out, or he can deregister completely. Now, that is an important tenet of GDPR, but there's also an important overriding concept, which is the council's ability to have a rightful and lawful means and reason for retaining that data that he may request to be removed. And if those two things clash, so Gary thinks, oh, I'm a bit behind my council tax, perhaps if I deregister, it's going to take them longer to find me and come after me for it. If he meets some of those criteria and you've got lawful reason to retain that data despite his request, then the configurable data retention policy on the My Council Services platform overrides the customer's request. So there's kind of a matrix, kind of fairly nuanced thing going on there, but the core concept is honouring the right to be forgotten and the right for a customer to control their data. So the long story short here is Gary, as a registered customer, has all of the tools to kind of manage that relationship, that data relationship with the council. So let's go and do a couple of other different bits and bobs. We've done a quick missed bin report. We've already done that. So let's go and do something simple, like a fly tip report, for example. So if I click on fly tip, we'll just go through a quick form. These are just example template forms. Is it blocking a road or pathway? Again, breadcrumb trail across the top so the customer knows where they're at. In essence, what we try and do in all of our kind of iterations and kind of digital manifestations of self-service is to follow the government digital service standards for clear labelling, large buttons, breadcrumb trails in terms of where you are through a process, all these sorts of things. So is it blocking a road or pathway? We'll say yes, it is. So in which case we ask a question, is it causing a health and safety issue? I'm going to say I have to step into the road to pass by. Is it on public or private property? We'll say it's on public. You could actually automatically define and process that from the geotag on the photo, for example, if you wanted to allow that to happen. If we committed it, if we said yes, then we ask to give them their name. We'll say no in this case to save a bit of time. And we'll say general rubbish has been dumped. Click on next. So then we get an opportunity to upload a form. Sorry, upload an image. I'm sure I've got, there we go, there's an archetypal dumped armchair there. So you can upload multiple images, you can control the size and permissible extensions of the file types and so on and so forth. It's a place-based service, so we need to give the customer an opportunity to tell us where that is at. So it's picking up my current location. I'm actually operating from my home office today, which is out in East Anglia. But if I want to override that and say, well, actually, it was in E18 1BD, for example, again, it will match to the National Land and Property Gazetteer address space, so you can pick an address. Equally, you can drop a pin on a map if it's in open spaces or something and move away from the address format. What date? When did it happen? We'll say today. Give it a priority. Again, this is just an option, and then we click on next, and away we go. So Gary can then review all of his details from map to photos to questions answered, and then click on submit, and away we go. So there's a couple of quick examples. Let's go and do something a little bit different now. So we're going to look on. I want to bring your attention over to the rest of the screen. We've done a couple of transactional activities using the left-hand sidebar and the search bar at the top here. We can also access commonly used applications. Again, these are all configurable. These hotspots, or as we call them, widgets, can be configured to link to existing web content, to transactional forms, payment forms, whatever it might be. And then on the right-hand side, at the top here, Gary's got a whole bunch of effectively his own management information. So if he clicks on service request, for example, he can see his own data around that flight tip that he's just reported and the missed collection. So if those statuses change, if things happen to those and they're updated, he can drill and look at the detail of those. So he's got his ability to check on this stuff at any time of his own choosing. In addition, of course, to the ability to receive proactive notifications in an automated way in the form of an email, an SMS, a text message, or a push notification. So there's lots of ways of keeping a customer up to date and making sure they've got information at their fingertips. The other area that I just wanted to draw your attention to was sitting below that, where we've got these various tags that allow a customer to add details about themselves that will give them effectively a single sign-on capability. So if Gary were to wanted to add business rate information, he needs to provide an account number and a postcode and add that service. What would then happen is a notification would be triggered back to his registered mobile number. As a registered customer, he can only access these as a registered customer. If there's a registered customer, he's got a mobile number, a validated mobile number registered with the service. It would then put a PIN code back to him that he'd then have to enter or click on a link to enter, and then he'd be able to add other services that would effectively give him access to data that resides in other systems. So that's the ability to add things like business rates, council tax, benefits information, whatever it might be. Once they're added, then you can go and view those services. So if I click on view council tax, for example, what that will do is drill back through to Gary's address of 78 Grove Hill, Southwood for London, the 182HZ, and give him examples of details of all of his historical council tax transactions. So this is actually reaching through to an integration with a third-party system, so a third-party Revs and Bens database, and this is an example of quite a deep integration, because what it's doing is pulling back, in this case, a bunch of synthetic data, test data, that gives the kind of really atomic detail of all of Gary's dealings from a point of view of council tax and other financial transactions. Whereas, to the extent that if he's had demand notifications in the past, he can go and download them and view them. We can see all these electronic billing. He can see his current detail. If he drills through to that, he can see all of that detail, right down to the recovery cost, the type of program that he's on, if he's receiving single person discount or whatever it might be. So that is an example of integration into a third-party data source, in this case, a revenues and benefits system. And we can do that. We've done that with Northcape and numerous others in terms of linking through to those systems. And that could either be to the live transactional system. More often than not, it's a daily refreshed staging database that's taken by the council, but we can link back through to them. So some examples there of the way that a customer, by registering, can get access to much more detailed information about their dealings with the council. I'll just scroll down a little bit. There's also charts and things that could be presented. As I've mentioned before, the whole interface around the customer portal can be customized and configured and embedded in line with your visual branding and the visual identity for your authority, and all of the contents can be configured and set up in any way that you want. I'll come to that in a bit more detail a little bit further down the demonstration. So if I just jump across, we'll do one more process and then we'll take a look at the back office. I'm just conscious of time. We're 10 past the hour, so we've got 20 minutes remaining, and then I can let you get on with the rest of your Tuesday afternoon. But we'll do one other example. We'll go for an apply for example, and we'll show a Green Garden Waste. So this is Gary signing up for Green Garden Waste as a collection. So we drop into, it's an standard e-form with plugins. Is he a new or returning customer? We'll say the new customer. But also this is using one of the additional line of business modules, which is the contracts and permits and licenses module, because an annual Green Garden Waste contract is a commercial contract between the council and the customer, assuming you're charging for it, which in this case we are. So this is based on a container-based system. So Gary can have one container or multiple containers. He can up the number of those. If he wants to do, they're £20 each. Says I want 2 containers because we've got a big garden. He can add those. I need to give a postal address at which I want these delivered. Try pick an address. Because we're using the contracts and licenses plugin, we can view all the terms and conditions that are associated with this particular type of contract. So when you're using the contracts module, what you're doing is really setting up contract templates. So they can be used for Green Garden Waste, they can be used for any other contract-based process or license or permit-based process. It'd be that taxi licensing, I mentioned blue badges, lots of other examples of things that councils do that are contract or license or permit shaped. Could be a market trading license, all these sorts of things. So once we've written out those details, we can write them back into the transaction, and then we can complete some, if there's some missing data, we can complete that. So you can use it as an opportunity for additional data capture. We know who Gary is. Click on next. We then get to the payment piece. So we confirm payment details, billing details in this example. And then we get to our first point of integration for this particular transaction. We're actually using Barclaycard as the test transaction gateway here, but we can do that with anything. I'll talk more to that in a moment. So there's a handshake going on between My Council Services and the selected payment gateway provider. We've done Civica, we've done Capita, we've done WorldPay, Iridium, Barclaycard, you name them, we've done them. Go cardless for direct debits, all these sorts of things are possible. We're into standard functionality of kind of online shopping now, so it's picked up the order reference details. It's the total charge is £40 because Gary selected 2 containers against the address that he chose, and it's picking up the merchant's address, Amber's in this case. Click on Visa, put in Gary's details. I'm sure you're all familiar with this from your own online shopping activities. An expiry date and a CVC number, and then click on confirm my payment. While it processes that, collects the payment off the card, what it will then do is just hand me back to My Council Services. So from a customer's point of view, my payment's been accepted, despite the fact that I've been working with 2 third-party technologies, My Council Services for the actual process, and Barclaycard Payment Gateway for the actual payment collection. It was pretty seamless from a customer's point of view. Click on next, and then I can just submit as a customer. If I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and I can submit it. So there's a bunch of examples of different things that a customer can do, from very straightforward, like looking up my refuse collection schedule, through to reporting a missed bin with conditional logic wrapped around it to prevent non-permissible reporting of bins, for example. We then went on and used our registration privileges and single sign-on privileges to go and look up the details of our council tax. And then we've gone ahead and we've signed up for a Green Garden Waste contract. So actually in the space of 20-25 minutes of demonstration, 20 minutes of demonstration, we've done a whole bunch of different transactions from a customer's point of view without the need to speak to anybody or to interface with anybody, and then we can continue to automate that in the back office. So what we're going to do now is take a slight change of direction for the last 10 minutes or so and take a look at this not from the customer's lens where we're working through a portal, but we'll look at that through the sort of CRM lens. So I'm going to sign on now. Again, I'm signing on through a browser, so there's nothing installed locally on the machine, but I'm signing on under a different profile, which is my own profile. So effectively assuming the role of a council officer. That could be a member of customer services staff or whatever it might be. Trying to remember my password. And then we just jump across to the demo instance interface, the test instance. And the first place that it takes us to is the service desk interface. So the service desk interface is really a kind of an easy to use and easy to navigate case management function. So you can see, for example, that Gary Wilcox, the customer under whose profile I've been operating for the last 25 minutes while we were navigating our way around the portal and I was sharing those details with you, has created a Green Garden waste registration today at 13:13, and slightly in advance of that at 1 o'clock, the same customer reported a missed bin collection against one of those properties. And we can drop into any of those particular details and take a look at the specifics of that transaction. So that's a fairly simple one. What you'll also notice there, folks, is that it's automatically created under the task header a task for missed bin collection. So it's automatically figured out and assigned that to the appropriate crew for missed bin collection, for having established that it was permissible for it to be reported as a missed bin. It then gone on to automatically assign that. So you've got the rules kicking in underneath all of these things to help you automate the process and make more seamless and more efficient the entire end-to-end set of activities. The same is true for the Green Garden waste registration. So if I drop into that, for example, I'll see the detail there. So I can see all of the detail around the garden collection, that he'd ordered 2 containers at £40. And crucially, the other thing there is it's created alongside that transaction, it's created a template using the garden collection contract template. So Gary Wilcox, 80 Grove Hill, and if I drop into that, I can see the detail of that particular contract. And I've then got a console accessible via service desk or contact center, which I'll show you in a moment, or the contracts console to go and manage that. So I can manage a renewal from here manually, or it can be done automatically. I can change the status of it. I can print a permit if a permit needs to be printed. And so you can manage the entire life cycle of the activity through renewal, through auto renewal, using the contracts template, which is effectively what we've done here. So we just jump back to the service desk interface very briefly. And there's an important point of, I suppose, point of order and kind of principle that underpins the platform is if we can make things reusable, then that's exactly what we'll try and do in terms of engineering that capability into the platform. So the first point of order on that is, so we've seen Gary using the eForms as a customer via the customer portal. So, using some of those report it forms, apply for it forms, so on and so forth. But if we jump back to the service desk interface, and I'm working as maybe an administrator in a function or a customer service agent, and I click on create service request through service desk, I can see all of those form catalogs. So if it's waste, I can help a customer report a missed bin. I can create a new trade registration process and complete that on behalf of a customer. I can do the same for Green Garden Waste, which Gary did earlier under his own steam. If there's a special collection, that can be done. And I can access all of those different processes as a customer, all those different form catalogs. So lots of things that I can do there. Again, for Street Scene, I can refresh that. I can report anything, as an assisted process if that's required. So that's a little bit of service desk. The other interface that I wanted to share with you was around contact center. So service desk is really more appropriate where an individual, a council officer, is perhaps working in waste or in leisure services or in library services or social care, or whatever it might be, where you're dealing with kind of transactional case management type issues because you're looking at the kind of the vertical slice of the council's activities that relate to that particular service area. That's really where service desk fits. But if I just take you across the contact center for a moment, that's much more of a customer service lens. So the ability really to see what it is that's going on with the customer in the round. And we start that process, that journey, by just typing in a name. So I type in Gary, for example, my customer that I've been dealing with, Gary Wilcox. If he's on the phone and I'm talking with Gary, I can search for his records and return any particular service request that might be relevant and pertinent to it. And that will drop me back into all of Gary's details. So having selected that particular service request, maybe he quoted the service request number at me on the phone, I can drop into Gary's record and I get all of the information about Gary. So I'm very much at this stage immersed in kind of Gary's universe and his relationship with, in this case, the made-up transactions for Redbridge Borough Council. So how is that presented to the user? Well, the screen for Contact Centre is broken up into logical sections. I'll start with the right-hand side panel, so over here first off. What we've got here is a whole bunch of profiling information about Gary. So in particular, I can see his thumbnail, so I can see what he looks like. I can see his name, I can see his email address, I can see his mobile number, I can see his preferred language, I can see his address. And then I've got further information, additional category information. Now, all of the information that resides in my council services is governed by what we call role-based access control. And role-based access control does exactly what it says on the tin, really. It means that based on who I am, what my privilege setting is, what my role setting is as a user, I can only see the functionality of the platform and, crucially, the data associated with my particular role privileges. So in this example, if I'm logged in as a CSA, I can see all Gary's contact details, and then I get to see a little bit further information. I can see that he's unemployed, and I can also see in this example that he's got a violent marker against his name, and that violent marker carries control measure 1, whatever that might be. But it might be that means if we've got going to his premises, we go double-handed, or you have to notify the local constabulary or whatever it might be. But you can build these components into the platform using what we call our MDM suite, our Master Data Management Suite, so that you can have information about the customer in the round, and you can choose and select and govern and manage who that's available to and who can view that. We can also see that he's marked as a vulnerable adult and that he's got impaired mobility. So, and lots of, clearly, all this information is completely synthetic. It's just made up for the purposes of the demonstration and to try and demonstrate the point. But the idea being that you've got the ability to present a whole bunch of different information to support and guide your members of staff and your colleagues who are walking through these processes with customers. So, on the left-hand side of the screen, or in the main body of the screen, I should say, we've also got access to all of Gary's service requests and transactions. So we can see that he signed up for a Green Garden waste collection service on the 2nd of July at 1:15, or just approaching, and he also reported a fly tip. So if he's calling about any of those issues, we can dip straight back into them. We've got all of the contextual information. I can see all of the other recent interactions that Gary has had, mainly with me, over the last few days, weeks. I can see all of the contracts that he's got in place, and I can also see any bookings or appointments that he's made. Gary's got quite a long history. He's obviously pretty active in terms of his interaction with the council. But you've got a fully fledged customer lens through which to view a particular customer's record based on privilege and based on the rights to see that because of your role. The other things that we can do from here is if Gary's on the phone and we're in the call centre and we're a CSA and he wants to create a service request, we've got the same access as we've got from Service Desk. I can access any of those waste catalogues or any of those form catalogues, I should say. So if it's street scene and he wants to report another fly tip, I can go ahead and I can use exactly the same form. So those forms reflect outward towards the customer and they reflect backward into the organisation. So that you design them once and you can deploy them multiple times. So a few other bits and pieces in terms of what I might be able to do from here. I can send an email to Gary if it's some communication I need to send him, or an SMS, or create a task, or look up details for him. But if I want to send an email, I can do that on a templated basis. So I can say it's going to come from customer services at Avamys. Maybe Gary's asking about school in year addition information. If I select that template as it exists, then it will automatically format for me an email that with attached information, links, all the information that Gary might need, and I can go ahead and I can send that to him. And that interaction will be written, or that activity will then be written into the overall interaction. So you see it appear up here. There's an email being created and sent on the 2nd of July. And if I then click on finish, it will write that interaction back into the process, and that will be stored. So the next service agent that picks that relationship up with Gary will see that an email was sent to him about in-year school admissions, and you've got nice continuity of capability in terms of what that means for the customer, what's been done with them before, as well as all that contextual information. So you've got two options for managing the sort of first stage of back office: Service Desk, which is more specific to the service area; Contact Centre, which is much more specific to customer services, the contact centre, not surprisingly. We do try and name things logically. And the final piece I wanted to share with you, if I may, just a couple of bits and pieces. Well, there's two things really. A quick look at at some reporting. So you've got that basic dashboard reporting. So we can slice and dice by inbound transactions, across different service areas or whatever it happens to be. So we can do quick by month, by day, by week reporting, by channel reporting, by issue reporting. You can report by customer. So who's the most active customers? What's going on? No surprises. Gary's pretty active. You can report by channel of use. So how are people contacting us via contact center or via different device types, so on and so forth. We can report by SLA, service level agreement. There's an ability to wrap service levels around different transaction types, report on bookings. There's a whole range of booking options available to you. Via service desk, you've got reporting in this tabular format where we can see things via a filter. So I can see all waste records by a form, by status, whatever it might be, by group, over a date, and I can have that as a report, a chart, or a map. So I've got lots of ways of reporting on that data, and that's real-time information. And then you've also got an analytics suite over here, which allows you effectively to create reports pretty much in any image. So we can look at things like booking schedules, we can look at payment reconciliation data, waste collection schedules, we can look at blue badge applications, but you can create these reports using the report details capability. You can just configure, and you've got control over yourself from the council point of view. So lots of different areas of reporting. We are very shortly going to switch over to version 8. So there's an upgrade going out with customers at the minute, and we've opened up an API into Microsoft Power BI, so that you can then extract any data automatically and use all of the kind of Power BI capabilities from a reporting point of view. So we've got internal reporting that takes you to a certain level, and if you really want to get busy on the reporting front, then we can offer interfaces into Power BI. More about that in our next round of webinars, I would expect. And then the final piece that I wanted to show you as we sort of step back into the detail is just to take you onto the administration screen. So the administration screen, as the name suggests, is the area in which you can configure feature and function of your instance of the My Council Services platform. And there is a huge amount of capability in here that goes into some fairly sort of significant technical functional detail. You'll be relieved here, I'm not going to try and kind of give you every point and click an option. I'm just going to show you a couple of bits and pieces. The first thing I want to show you is just to draw your attention to plugins. So I'm under the general settings and plugins. And we've got 3 examples here. We've got payment integration, web service reference, and map overlay. So payment integration, if I click on that, you'll see that there are existing payment plugins for Civica, Capita, Barclaycard. When we do a payment integration for a customer, there has to be a piece of technical work that gets done to make your secure multi-tenanted instance of the My Council Services platform speak to your secure payment card industry compliant merchant services and payment gateway account. You have to do a technical integration project to make that happen. But once that's done, that exists as a plugin in your instance on your platform. So if you then launch your Green Garden Waste service with the payment plugin, that's great, you can get on and use that. But if you then want to launch another service, say it's taxi licensing, and you want customers to be able to pay using the same payment gateway, you can just recall that plugin and deploy it into your taxi licensing form or trade waste form or whatever it happens to be. So the idea really, the message I'm trying to get across is where we have to do technical integrations and things like payment gateways, we do them, and then we leave them on the platform for you to reuse to your heart's content as required operationally. So that's a bit about plugins. In terms of form design, there's a full forms builder and eForms designer, so you can build your forms from scratch. You can also borrow with pride from your neighbours. So if you want to go and do a fly tip form, but you don't want to start from scratch, just go and search the form store for fly tip. And what you'll get presented with is every fly tip option, be it Glenagwents, Blackburns, Finchers, Conways, Maidstones, Medways, whoever it happens to be. You can go and preview their form, and then if you like the look of it, you can click on it, and you can borrow with pride. Import it into your instance, improve it, develop it, and then once you've saved it under your own, once you've got it saved in your own profile, you can share it back to the form store so that others can benefit from the improvements that you've made. So where possible, we've tried as much as we can to make the thing a kind of community-based effort, and it's been a customer-advised development process to date, certainly in terms of what we choose to develop, and that was a very good example of where our customers said it would be nice to be able to share forms. So we built a form store. The basic message here is in the administration screen, you can pretty much do whatever you like. I'm very conscious of time. I said I'd allow you to get on with the rest of your Tuesday afternoon by 1:30, which is our allotted time. So I'm just going to use the last minute just to jump through a few last slides, which I'll do pretty quickly, and then I will let you get on your way. So advice to get started, and if any of you are on the session this morning, you would have already seen this. But you can implement these things incrementally. You don't have to try and boil the ocean. You don't have to do things in a single step. And in fact, breaking projects up into phases is probably not a bad idea. Based on our experience, it's quite good to knock over some wins early. So plan for the long term, make sure you know where you're heading, make sure you know what your long-term vision is, but don't try and do everything in one go. Make sure you're notching up successes as you go and demonstrating value as you go. My Council Services is an open platform. That means we play nicely and can integrate well with other third-party applications that you're inevitably going to be using. So you can use it as part of a mixed economy, or we can be the primary platform. And I said this earlier, but yeah, I'll just reiterate it. Technology is really only part of the solution. You do need to engage in a kind of broader organisational education information programme as part of your transformation programme, but it will inevitably be supported by a technology solution of one description or another. We hope that's going to be My Council Services. So think about the kind of the softer side of transformation as well as the technology edge side. And then on that note, it just remains for me to say thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. I know that's a little bit of a kind of baptism of fire and a white knuckle ride through just one aspect of My Council Services for those of you who haven't seen it before, but I hope it's kind of helped breathe some life into it and been useful information to get you started. Just to reiterate, the slides will be available for download. We will also make a recording of today's session available, and feel free to contact us with any questions, or if you would like us to run something similar but for your organisation on a private basis, either like this as an online session, or indeed, we're very happy to visit on site. Thank you very much indeed, folks, and have a productive rest of your day. Bye-bye now.